Hey there, deep divers. Today we're tackling a question I know a lot of us are grappling with. How do we create a work culture that's both productive and promotes well-being?
Right.
We're going deep on Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson's Remote.
Okay.
These are the founders of 37 Signals.
Right.
Now, Basecamp,
Yeah.
a company that's been remote first for years.
Yeah.
So they're not just talking theory.
For a long time, yeah.
Yeah. So what's so radical about remote
Wow.
is how it flips the script on where work should happen.
It's true.
It's not just about telecommuting.
Right.
It questions the very idea that offices are the best places for getting things done.
Exactly. It really questions the fundamental assumptions that we have about work.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
I think we've all felt that frustration.
Yeah.
You go into the office to focus,
Yeah.
and suddenly it's a whirlwind of meetings,
Yeah.
interruptions.
Well, yeah.
That guy who always wants to chat about last night's game.
Exactly. The book uses this really vivid analogy. They call the office an interruption factory.
Okay.
Your day gets chopped up into these tiny bits, and deep, meaningful work becomes nearly impossible.
Oh, wow.
It's like you can never really get into that flow state
Right.
because you're constantly being pulled in different directions.
That was out of it.
Yeah.
So their argument is that remote work isn't about escaping work.
Right.
It's about escaping the office to actually get work done.
It's about finding the space to focus.
Yeah. And what I found really eye-opening was their prediction about cities.
Oh, yeah, that one's really interesting.
Yeah.
They basically say that, in the past,
Mm-hmm.
people left rural areas for the city,
Right, to find work.
trading tranquility for opportunity. But now with the internet, everything's accessible from anywhere.
Yeah.
So they predict that in the next 20 years, leaving the city will become the new luxury.
Wow.
Imagine having both freedom and access. That's a pretty powerful shift.
Huge mind flip. It ties into their point about talent, too.
Yeah.
They argue that talent isn't concentrated in these specific hubs anymore.
Not at all.
They use 37 Signals as an example.
Right.
They're based in Chicago, but their team is global.
Global company.
Yeah.
And it works.
So it challenges that whole Silicon Valley myth, right?
Completely. You can build a world-class company without being in a specific zip code.
And you're not limited by geography anymore.
Exactly.
I'm curious, how do they address that classic fear?
Oh, yeah.
That if you can't see people, you can't trust them to work.
The trust issue. Well, they're very direct about it.
Yeah.
They say, to successfully work with other people, you have to trust each other.
Okay.
Basically, if you can't trust your employees to work remotely, maybe you need different employees.
Yeah.
It's about having that fundamental trust.
So it's not about managing the chairs,
No.
which is how they describe that old school butts and seats mentality.
Right. It's not about presenteeism.
It's about leading and verifying work.
It is. It's about focusing on the output.
And this actually forces managers to become better at
Yeah.
defining clear expectations,
Right.
understanding the work itself,
Hmm.
and supporting their team to reach goals.
Because you can't just rely on seeing someone at their desk anymore.
Right. You have to actually look at the results they're producing.
You have to trust that they're getting the work done.
I'm guessing this also ties into how they handle things like distractions at home.
Right.
After all, isn't that a big worry for companies?
Well, they counter that by saying,
Oh.
if someone's constantly tempted to slack off, maybe the problem isn't their location, it's the work itself.
Okay.
If it's engaging and challenging, people are naturally motivated to do it no matter where they are.
That's a good point. It's not about trying to control every minute of someone's day.
Exactly.
It's about creating work that people actually want to do.
It is.
What about practical stuff, though, like client communication?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work when you're remote?
Well, they offer some interesting examples. Like Jellyvision, one of their clients asks Fortune 500 companies not to schedule meetings before 10 a.m.
Oh, wow.
to accommodate their remote team's time zones. It's about setting clear boundaries.
That's interesting. So it requires some upfront communication,
It does.
but it's totally doable.
It is.
And internally, they have this system for different levels of urgency, right?
Yeah, they call it a graduated communication system.
Okay.
Email for non-urgent stuff, instant messaging for quicker responses, and phone calls only for true emergencies.
So it's a way to be thoughtful about how you interrupt each other.
Exactly, and it helps to reduce that feeling of always being on.
It sounds like it encourages people to think before they hit reply, all on some massive email chain.
Oh, absolutely. It helps to keep those quick questions contained so they don't disrupt someone else's flow.
Right. But even with all these systems in place, I think a lot of us still crave that social connection, right?
Of course.
The office gossip, the shared lunches.
The water cooler conversations.
And that's where their idea of the virtual water cooler comes in.
That's right. They use a chat program at 37 Signals.
Okay.
To create a space for those informal conversations.
Okay.
Just like you'd have around the water cooler. Right? It's a way to share jokes, talk about the news, even bond over live events.
So it's kind of brilliant. It replicates that sense of camaraderie you get from being around people.
It does.
Even when you're not physically together.
Exactly. And it can actually be even better than the office water cooler.
Oh, really?
Because you can connect with people from all over the world.
And it sounds like this ties into how they keep everyone aligned on projects, even when they're working in different time zones.
Absolutely. They have this weekly ritual called What Have You Been Working On?
Okay.
Where everyone posts what they've accomplished and what they're planning for the next week.
So it creates transparency and accountability.
It does.
And it gives everyone a sense of the bigger picture.
Exactly. You're all on the same page, even though you're not in the same room.
It's like a virtual stand-up meeting.
Right.
But without the awkwardness of having to be on camera first thing in the morning.
And because it's written, it's actually more thoughtful and thorough than a lot of in-person stand-ups I've been in.
So you're getting a clearer picture of what everyone's doing.
Right.
And you're doing it in a way that respects people's time and individual work styles.
Exactly.
Okay, this is all making sense so far.
Good.
But I have to push back a little on the no office idea.
Okay.
Even 37 Signals has company-wide meetups, right?
They do, and it highlights an important point.
Okay.
Even in a remote-first company, those occasional in-person gatherings are crucial for team building and deeper connection.
They really are.
They hold these meetups in fun locations: Kohler, Wisconsin, San Diego, California, even York Harbor, Maine.
It sounds like a great way to bring everyone together and create some shared memories.
It is. It's about building those relationships outside of work.
Do they do anything else to foster that team spirit?
Yeah, they'll also do team-specific sprints for tackling particularly challenging projects.
Right,
It's
yeah.
like a burst of intense in-person collaboration to push through a specific goal.
So it's about finding the right balance.
It is.
Most of the time you're working remotely, focusing on your individual tasks. But then strategically, you bring people together to recharge those social batteries.
Yes.
And tackle those big collaborative challenges.
Exactly.
This is reminding me of how open source projects work, like Linux or Ruby on Rails.
Oh, yeah.
All these people contributing code from all over the world.
That's a great parallel. The authors actually talk about that.
Okay.
How these massive, complex projects get built by people who rarely, if ever, meet in person. It shows that remote collaboration can be incredibly powerful when it's done right.
And they're doing it on a huge scale.
They are, and they're producing some of the most important software in the world.
That's amazing.
Hey.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up part 1 of this deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground, from escaping the interruption factory to the surprising future of cities and how to build trust and camaraderie in a remote team.
It's a lot to think about.
But stay tuned in part 2. We're going to get even more practical, exploring the nitty-gritty of hiring, managing, and building a thriving remote-first culture.
Sounds cool.
Welcome back, deep divers. Last time we dug into some pretty radical ideas from remote, like ditching the office altogether, and the surprising truth about where talent really lives.
It's true. Talent is everywhere.
But let's get real. I know a lot of companies are still clinging to that butts and seats mentality.
It's a tough shift for a lot of managers.
Yeah.
There's this fear, if you can't physically see your employees,
Right.
you're losing control.
I get it. But how do you convince those managers that remote work isn't just people goofing off in their pajamas all day?
Well, remote has a really powerful counter-argument to this.
Yeah.
Shift from managing chairs to leading and verifying work.
I like that it puts the focus back where it should be, on the actual output,
Exactly.
not just whether someone's physically present. I'm guessing this ties into how 37 Signals handles things like performance reviews?
Absolutely. When you can't rely on seeing someone at their desk every day,
Right.
you have to evaluate them based on what they actually produce. It forces everyone to be more clear about expectations and goals.
So instead of vague ideas about being a team player or
Yeah.
showing initiative,
Yeah.
you're looking at concrete results.
Yes.
Like projects, completed deadlines, met, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about shifting from presenteeism to performance.
I see.
And that can be incredibly liberating for both managers and employees.
Okay.
It fosters a culture of accountability and a shared commitment to achieving goals.
This leads to another big question. How do you build a strong company culture when everyone's scattered across different locations?
Right.
Can you even have a company culture without a physical office to gather in?
That's a common concern, but the authors are adamant that culture isn't tied to a place.
Okay.
They define it as the spoken and unspoken values and actions of the organization.
So it's about those core principles that guide how everyone interacts, makes decisions, and treats clients regardless of where they're sitting.
Exactly. It's about those shared values that create a sense of belonging and purpose.
So it's less about ping pong tables and free snacks in the break room.
Right?
And more about things like how you handle disagreements, what level of quality you strive for, how transparent you are with each other.
Exactly. They give some great examples of key cultural questions every company needs to answer.
Okay.
How do we treat our customers? What quality standards do we uphold? What are our communication styles?
Okay.
What are our expectations around workload and work-life balance? How do we approach risk-taking?
It's like defining the personality of the company
Yes.
and then making sure everyone embodies that personality, whether they're working from a home office, a coffee shop, or a beach in Bali.
Right, and then you need to actively foster that culture in a remote setting.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, it means regular communication, both formal and informal.
Okay.
It's about creating opportunities for those casual connections that happen organically in an office.
Okay, so this is where those virtual water coolers come back in.
Definitely those informal chats are vital for keeping people connected and building camaraderie.
Yeah.
And the authors also stress the importance of those occasional in-person gatherings, like 37 Signals company-wide meetups.
Those sound amazing. We talked about some of the cool locations they've chosen.
Yeah, it's a way to bring everyone together outside of the usual work context.
It's like blending work with adventure.
Yeah.
But aside from those big meetups, do they do anything else to keep the team spirit alive?
They'll also do team-specific sprints for tackling those really challenging projects.
Okay.
It's a chance to get everyone together for a burst of focused collaboration.
Right.
To bounce ideas off each other and work through problems in real time.
So it's not that in-person interaction is bad.
No, not at all.
It's just that you don't need it all the time.
Exactly.
You can be strategic about when and how you bring people together for maximum impact.
It's about finding the right balance for your team.
It's like they're taking the best of both worlds, the focus of remote work with the energy of in-person collaboration.
Exactly. And, it's interesting to see how this model has been embraced and refined by the open source software community.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Think about how massive projects like Linux MySQL or Ruby on Rails are built.
It's incredible.
These are incredibly complex pieces of software developed by geographically dispersed teams of volunteers who mostly communicate online.
And it works amazingly well.
It's a testament to the power of remote collaboration.
It is.
And the effectiveness of the right tools. It challenges that old school thinking that you need to be in the same physical space to do great work.
You really don't.
So if open source can pull it off, why not businesses? How do you translate those lessons into the everyday world of a company?
Well, Remote has a ton of practical advice for anyone who wants to go remote first.
Okay.
Whether they're building a company from scratch or trying to transition an existing team.
Let's start with building a company from scratch.
Well,
What do you need to consider if you want to be remote from day one?
they stress the importance of making it part of your DNA from the very beginning.
Establish clear communication guidelines. Invest in the right collaboration tools, and make sure everyone understands the expectations and benefits of working remotely.
It makes sense that it's easier to build the right culture when you're starting fresh, rather than trying to retrofit it onto an existing structure. But what about those companies that are already established with a traditional office setup?
Right.
Can they make the switch, or are they stuck?
The authors believe that it's never too late to adapt,
Okay.
but it requires a thoughtful approach, they suggest, starting small.
Okay.
Perhaps by allowing a few trusted employees to work remotely a couple of days a week.
Kind of like dipping your toes in the water before jumping in headfirst.
Exactly. See how it goes. Gather feedback, adjust your processes, and gradually expand the program as you gain confidence and experience.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's say a company decides to take the plunge.
Okay.
What are some key things to keep in mind when hiring for a remote-first environment? One of the biggest shifts is focusing on skills and experience rather than location.
Right, because you're no longer limited by geography.
Exactly. You can cast a much wider net and attract talent you might not have had access to before.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
It opens up so many possibilities, both for companies and for job seekers. But how do you evaluate candidates when you can't meet them in person?
They advocate for a portfolio-based hiring process.
Okay.
Instead of relying solely on resumes and interviews, have candidates showcase their skills through real-world examples of their work.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like showing, not just telling.
Right.
You're getting concrete evidence of what they can actually do.
Mm-hmm.
But what about roles where portfolios aren't as relevant, like customer service or project management?
For those roles, they suggest posing real-world problems as part of the application process.
Oh, interesting.
Give candidates a scenario they might encounter on the job and see how they approach it.
It's a way to assess their problem-solving skills, their communication style, and even their cultural fit. It's like a mini audition for the job itself.
Exactly. And when it comes to compensation, they're very clear.
Okay.
Pay people based on their skills and experience, not on their location.
Equal pay for equal work, no matter where someone chooses to live.
I love that.
Yeah.
It seems like remote work has the potential to level the playing field in so many ways. So we've talked about hiring, but what about actually managing a remote team? What are some key things to keep in mind?
One of the most important things is establishing clear communication guidelines and regular check-ins.
Okay.
Make sure everyone knows how and when to communicate.
Right.
And schedule those one-on-one calls to stay connected, build rapport, and address any concerns.
It sounds like it's all about being proactive and intentional about communication.
It is. You can't just assume that things will sort themselves out organically like they might in an office environment.
And you also need to provide the right tools and resources to support your team.
Absolutely. That means investing in things like project management, software, video conferencing platforms.
And collaboration tools that make remote work seamless and efficient.
It's about making sure everyone has what they need to be productive and connected, regardless of their location.
Exactly. And this is where those "what have you been working on" breads come in handy.
Oh, right.
They create a shared understanding of who's doing what the priorities are, and what progress is being made.
I like how it builds in that natural accountability without feeling like someone's constantly breathing down your neck.
Right. It's about creating transparency and trust.
And it fosters a culture of transparency and collaboration. Everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And they feel more connected to the team and the overall goals. Okay, so we've talked about communication tools and keeping everyone aligned.
Yes.
But what about that age-old fear of remote work?
Oh, yeah.
People slacking off because they're not being watched. How do you address that concern?
The author's approach is radical but simple.
Okay.
Trust your team. They argue that if you've hired the right people, set clear expectations, and provided the right support, you don't need to micromanage their every move.
It's about shifting from a culture of control to a culture of trust.
Exactly. Focus on results, not on hours logged or whether someone's online at a specific time. Give people the autonomy to manage their own time and workload, and they'll be more likely to thrive.
It's about empowering your team, not policing them.
Right. And remember, remote work can actually improve work-life balance and reduce stress.
Oh, yeah.
Which can lead to happier, more productive employees.
That's a huge selling point. The idea that you could have a successful career and a fulfilling personal life without having to sacrifice one for the other, it's a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely. The authors shared their own experiences of how remote work has allowed them to be more present for their families, attend school events, and integrate their work and personal lives in a way that just wasn't possible before.
It's like breaking free from that old school mentality that work has to be a grind. It sounds like they're advocating for a more humane and sustainable way of working.
Exactly. They believe that when people feel valued, respected, and trusted, they do their best work, and when they have the freedom and flexibility to design a work life that fits their needs, everyone benefits.
This is making me think about all those parents who struggle to balance childcare with their careers. Remote work could be a game changer for them.
Absolutely. They talk about how remote work can empower parents, especially mothers, to stay engaged in their careers without having to compromise their family time.
It's about creating a work culture that recognizes that people have lives outside of work and that those lives are important.
And that supporting people to thrive in all areas of their lives ultimately leads to better results for everyone.
I love that. So we've covered a lot of ground here in part 2, from hiring and managing remote teams to the importance of trust and communication.
All the great stuff.
But before we dive into part 3, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. Imagine for a moment that you have the complete freedom to design your ideal workday. What would that look like?
Oh, that's a good one.
Where would you work? What would your schedule be?
It's a great exercise to start envisioning what's possible with remote work. Think about the tools and resources you'd need to be most productive and fulfilled, and consider how you could structure your workday to align with your energy levels, your personal commitments, and your overall well-being.
Welcome back, deep divers. I hope you've had some time to think about that question we left you with.
Yeah.
What does your ideal workday look like? Because that's the beauty of this whole remote work revolution.
It is.
It can really be about tailoring work to your life, not the other way around.
That's the goal, right?
And that ties into another point remote makes about FaceTime.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in an office, you're constantly surrounded by people.
Right.
But how much of that is actually valuable interaction?
That's a good question.
I think we've all been in those meetings that could have been an email.
Oh, absolutely. Or a quick phone call.
The authors argue that the scarcity of FaceTime when you're remote actually makes those moments more valuable.
Interesting.
You're more intentional about how you use that time.
Right.
So those meetings, those video calls, they have more impact.
You're not just wasting time.
It makes sense. You're not just swinging by someone's desk to chat about the game anymore.
Right.
So those interactions become more focused, more about collaboration.
They have to be.
And it forces you to be more efficient with your communication, too.
That's true.
Instead of interrupting someone for a quick question, you might just send a message or add it to a shared document.
Yeah, it's about respecting each other's time.
It reduces those constant distractions that can derail your flow in an office.
The interruptions.
That's a great point. I'm already thinking about how I can be more mindful of that even when I am in the office.
Me too.
But let's talk about a big one, motivation.
Okay.
If you're not surrounded by people that hustle and bustle, is it harder to stay on track?
It's a valid concern, but the authors have a fascinating take on motivation. They argue that external motivators,
Like what?
like bonuses or the fear of getting in trouble,
Yeah,
they only work for so long.
I guess so. So what works better?
They advocate for intrinsic motivation.
Okay.
That's when the work itself is so engaging, so aligned with your skills and passions that you're driven from within.
Like hitting that flow state.
Exactly, where you completely lose track of time.
Now that's the kind of motivation we all want, right? To be excited about the work itself,
It is.
not just the paycheck at the end of the month.
Passion projects.
And they offer practical advice for cultivating this, both for individuals and managers.
Right.
For individuals, it's about seeking out work that aligns with your passions, setting clear goals, and breaking down big tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
So it's about taking ownership of your work and finding those little wins that keep you going.
What about for managers? How do you foster that kind of intrinsic motivation in your team?
They emphasize empowering your team, give them autonomy, ownership over their projects, and a sense of trust that they can do the job well.
So it's about creating a culture of support and encouragement,
It is.
rather than micromanagement and pressure.
You want people to feel like they can take risks and be creative.
It makes sense when you feel respected and trusted, you're more likely to rise to the occasion, right?
Absolutely.
It's not about being watched. It's about being given the space to do your best work. This is making me think about something else. The book mentions the power of a change of scenery.
Oh, yeah. They're big believers in shaking things up.
Okay.
They encourage remote workers to embrace the flexibility that remote work offers and to vary their work locations.
So like working from different places.
Exactly. One day you might be at home, the next at a coffee shop, maybe even a co-working space for a bit of social interaction.
So it's not just about being remote. It's about being location independent.
It is. Your office can be anywhere with a Wi-Fi connection.
And they also encourage taking advantage of traveling opportunities.
Of course.
To combine work with exploring new places.
Work and play.
It's about breaking free from routine and experiencing the world as your office.
It's a pretty amazing way to live.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Work doesn't have to be this static thing you do in the same place every day.
Not at all.
It can be dynamic, adventurous even. But wouldn't all that change be distracting?
They actually argue the opposite.
Really?
They say these shifts in scenery can spark creativity, lead to new insights, and help prevent burnout.
I can see that sometimes you just need a fresh perspective to get those creative juices flowing.
Right.
And even just a change of routine can help you feel more energized and motivated.
All right.
Okay, we've covered a lot.
We have.
Motivation, communication, the importance of being intentional about your time and your workspace.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get personal for a moment. One of the biggest appeals of remote work, at least for me, is the potential to transform family life.
Oh, absolutely.
What does remote say about that?
This is where the book really shines. I think the authors share their own experiences of how remote work has allowed them to be more present as parents,
Okay.
attending school events, helping with homework, just being around more for their families.
I can relate to that. Those everyday moments are so precious.
They are.
And they're so easy to miss when you're stuck in an office all day.
You miss a lot.
And they argue that this isn't just a nice perk.
No.
It's a fundamental shift in how we can structure our lives. Remote work gives you the flexibility to integrate your work and family in a way that just isn't possible with a traditional 9-to-5 job.
It breaks down those barriers between work and life.
It's about creating a work life that actually works for you and your family, not the other way around. It's like they're saying you don't have to choose between having a successful career and being a present parent.
You can have both.
And they highlight how this is especially powerful for mothers who often face that impossible choice. Remote work can offer a more sustainable path, allowing women to continue building their careers without sacrificing those crucial early years with their children.
It's about giving women more choices.
It's about recognizing that people have lives outside of work and that those lives matter.
And that supporting people to thrive in all areas of their lives actually leads to better work, too.
It's a win-win all around.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to step back and remember what remote is really about.
Okay.
It's not just about working from home. It's about rethinking the whole idea of work.
It's about challenging the status quo.
It's a manifesto for a more humane, more flexible, and ultimately more fulfilling way of working. It's about challenging those outdated assumptions that tie work to a specific place and embracing the possibilities of a truly location-independent future.
It's about freedom and flexibility.
It's exciting. It's a little scary, but it's definitely worth exploring.
I agree.
So as you think about your own work, your career, your life,
Yeah.
remember the key takeaways from remote.
What are they again?
Embrace trust. Focus on results. Cultivate that intrinsic motivation. And don't be afraid to design a work life that truly works for you.
It's good advice.
Whether you're an individual, a team leader, or a CEO, there's something in this book for everyone.
It's a must-read.
And remember, it's not just about being productive. It's about being happy.
That's important.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of remote work. Until next time, deep divers keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Thanks for having me.